welcome back to Casting Commons, the show where we discuss and talk about all things Pauper. I'm your host, Teasdale, and this is my co-host, the prosperous partnership himself, Reese.
Hello.
It doesn't really work, but I was going with some sort of, ambiotic relationship we've got going on here, because, it's the last ever episode of the year, so I thought I'd be ending a high and a nice note. So, Paul, what have you been up to this week?
I have played quite a bit of Pauper this week, actually. I played our F&M, which I ended up using Grixis Affinity, and reminding myself how good the deck is. Like, it's just insane. Especially now with like Tide and Blade and stuff like that as well. It felt really good. I ended up going 3-0, beat Glitters, Kuldotha, and Blue Black Fae. All pretty handily. So I'll either be running that back again on Friday, or I'm debating like playing Elves. I've seen a new Elves list that I quite like, but and then I guess on the topic of Elves, I have played a league with Elves as well on Modo. That was slightly worse. That ended up 3-2. It probably should have been 4-1, but I lost a pretty close game to Blue Black Fae, where, well, I think it's pretty favoured for me generally, but he ended up, did I lead the Stampede? I think I lead the Stampede and he counterspelled it with 2 fairies in play. And then I was like, and then he had his turn and it was passed back to me. And I had either a lead or a whatever the blue draw spell is. Distant Melody, yeah. And I could Distant Melody for I think only like 3 or 4. So I was like, oh well, I'll get this lead off while he doesn't have a spell stutter sprite because he's used his count spell, and then he'd ripped a spell stutter sprite. And then I was like, oh, that's annoying. And then I untapped to Distant Melody and it ripped another spell stutter sprite. So he literally went counter spell into spell stutter for 3, spell stutter for 4, and I was like, yeah. So that was an unlucky one. And then my other loss was to like a Boros Synth / Gates deck. Which seemed like just a horrendous matchup for me.
Yeah, a lot
it
of
was
burn.
just basically a pile of burn and then a load of sideboard cards.
Yeah, I can imagine it seems pretty bad. I
guess. And then, yeah, go on.
I was just gonna say, I guess you've got that. Obviously, the only thing you can hope for is if it's Gates, is that you're just that slightly bit faster with all the tap lands, but most of the time it's probably not meant to be.
I think if it was like, because he started off with a white gate and named red, and I was just like, oh, maybe he's, because I was on the plane, played a Mystic, and I thought he might just be core gates with like the Smash to Dust in the main. I was like, oh well, that's not the worst. But then as soon as he was seen he was full Boros, I was like, this isn't going to go well with all the bolts and Galv Blasts as well. And then other than that, I've done a little bit of like sorting of decks. Obviously pulled those few cards for you so you can play Gardens on Friday.
Yep.
And just bits and pieces like that.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah, to be fair, I've done a lot of Pauper content side of things. So as you'll be aware, obviously I've been set up for the greatest video I've ever recorded, and it's been fantastic. I did announce it on Twitter that I was doing a Pauperwars, and honestly, it took so much work to do it, even more work than the tier list, which took so much effort to like save each individual image and all this sort of stuff. But going through every card and like figuring out all sorts it was so much work, but honest to God, the end result was so fun. Even dressed the part as well. That was, to be fair, that was actually the most fun bit about it.
The commitment.
The commitment to it. But yeah, so that was basically it. Was the main thing I did. Obviously, there's a category which was like the greatest Pauper content creator of the year or whatever it was. So I announced like 6 or 7 names there, and then shortlisted that, and got a lot of feedback on like all sorts of stuff, like who it should be, or what people thought like the best creature should be, or what the best instant should be. So it's really good when you just get this engagement from the community and stuff like that.
I think it's probably a video as well that will just show how strong this year was for Pauper. Like how much was added just this year that's actually like changed it quite dramatically.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because some of the stuff you look at it and you think, oh, this card, and oh wait, that's end of 2022 or that's mid 2022. But then you look at some of them, you're like, oh, that's been in there for ages, and then you look at it's like June 2023. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
it's so weird. It's like looking at certain things, you just think like, oh, Swift Spear was this year, but it wasn't. It was last year. But then you look you look at things like All That Glitters and Lorien Revealed. I feel like they've been in the game forever, but they're not. It's like so recent. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then other than that, obviously we've been working on an announcement, which obviously we'll touch on down below. And I got to record a league last week with Madu Synth. That was great as well. I enjoyed messing about that and finally had some success with that. And then I'm planning on, obviously, I think, see if I can get a Gardens League sorted as well. I've just finalised my list, which is why I also sent you the list of cards that I needed for. So I'll hopefully see if I can get that recorded, but no promises or commitments as it is Christmas.
That means you're off. It means you can fit it in easier.
Yes. Newborn child says otherwise, but yes. But yeah, that's about it. Should we move on to our exciting news?
Yeah, go for it.
So, Casting Commons, obviously, we've had an amazing year. The main thing is, what I'd like to say we did this year is we separated ourselves from being on my main channel to a separate channel, and it's standalone Spotify, it's standalone YouTube, which is obviously great, and the support's been fantastic. So, we decided amongst ourselves that basically we should up our game, and the first thing that needed to change was the logo. The logo made sense when we were on my channel and it was like a series, but having Luna as the logo, kind of, or my logo in amongst that, just kind of made no sense. So, because of that, we've designed a new logo, just about finalised, and we'll be starting our new year with let's call it a new motto of New Year, New Pod, which is basically like New Year, New Me. And because of this, starting Christmas Eve, we'll post a giveaway on the Twitter page, and the winner will be given effectively a merch bundle, and that'll include a t-shirt, a mug, and some other sort of goodies, which are still to be decided. But those ultimately will all have the new logo, which you'll show and see on the Christmas Eve Twitter page on the post. And to enter it, all you have to do is comment to the tweet with an image showing that you're either following us on Spotify or you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Then like and retweet the post for a chance to win. The winner will be announced around the 16th of January. That'll be on the episode where we'll announce the giveaway. I think it should end probably the Friday before, which is the 12th of January. But obviously keep following the Twitter page because that will keep all the updates. After that, not only with the new year, with obviously New Year, New Pod, we're striving, obviously, personally, striving to do better social media interaction from the Twitter page in particular, and also other things as well. So that'll obviously include, we'll start taking like shorts and snippets from this pod and kind of just to highlight interesting things we've said. It could be regarding how we think the metagame's going to change. Just little snippets that are digestible in shorts. And that'll obviously be on YouTube. Most likely Instagram and TikTok I'm unsure on because I have no idea how to work that thing, but I'm hoping I do get a lesson off the wife. So that is that. And finally, the other thing that I'd like to do with the New Year, New Pod is obviously open the bonus episodes with special guests. Obviously, I'm not talking one a month, but I'd like to say get a few out there, a lot more. We've currently only had the one, and we do have our first one in the new year. And that...
Well, we sort of had two. You had Callie in when I was away.
Yeah, we had Callie.
I would count Callie as a special guest.
We've had two, I guess. I don't want to insult Callie, I guess. Yeah, that's fair. But so we'll be starting our first one. Our first one is in January. That's mid-January we'll be recording. And yeah, stay tuned for more deals. Again, just give the Casting Commons page a follow, and that'll be up to date with all the news. So it's basically a sign that obviously Casting Commons had a great year, and you guys have obviously been great supporting us, and you just like to give back with obviously a new year, fresh and more interactive, and just hit the ground running. That's it. Apart from I would like to say obvious one, but basically this will be the last podcast for 2023. After that, we'll be seeing you in the new year. Reese was eager to do Boxing Day, but I need a break. I'm sorry, guys. I do.
You'll have to look those challenge results up yourself.
Yes. Just send Reese a tweet saying what you think about this top 32 and send him a link. He'll talk to you about it. He'll tell you it all. He's eager. But that is our news. So please keep an eye out for the giveaway, and obviously we'll keep up to date on the social media about everything that's coming and new sort of things. Especially keep an eye on the YouTube channel. We'll be keeping it a lot more up to date than I personally have been, and also be taking a lot of obviously snippets from the show that you can see in a much more digestible form. So that'll be great for you. But that's it. That's our news. Would we like to go down, talk to the challenges, unless you want to talk about anything?
I think there's one other thing I'd like to mention, which is obviously outside of our sort of announcements, just another sort of news bit. Is just the update that Daybreak have done to the MTGO deck list page.
Yeah.
So firstly, it now tells you the results in the actual order that they're finished, rather than the order before the top 8. So that's good. It makes it a lot easier for me writing results down. But also it now shows all the results. It doesn't just show top 32s anymore. Which again is really good. You can go much further down. You can see the total number of players in that challenge really easily now. And if you come 33rd, you can still go and see your deck list, or you can scan for some interesting brews lowdown, which I think is just a really good change that probably should have just been something that existed from the start, but just never really was there for some reason.
Yeah. Another thing I guess on that as well is they have said it'll be same day as well. So because if they are on if the challenge on Saturday, it'll be Saturday, most likely the US time. Saturday it'll be that day, which is also good because at the moment Monday's like kind of when everything comes up. But this is why this podcast is obviously late, I'm assuming, because they were doing like maintenance or work on the decklist page and they were down all day yesterday.
Yeah, so we ended up with the Saturday results, but we didn't have any Sunday results, unfortunately. So we'll be a day late uploaded, but but it's worth it because it is a really good change overall.
Oh, for sure. So we'd like to move on with that, talking about the Saturday results?
Yes. So Saturday the 16th of December. First place was Kuldotha Red. Second place was also Kuldotha Red. Third and fourth were a pair of blue-white glitters. And then fifth through eighth were Mono Blue Terror, Jeskai Wildfire, a black-white Blade deck, and blue-black Fae. And then the two near misses in ninth was a Jeskai Glitters, and 10th was White Weenie.
Well,
yeah. So a bit of a flashback. Obviously, first and second for Kuldotha is pretty big, showing that the deck is still very much alive. It wasn't really that represented in either challenge. From what I've been able to see, it was pretty low numbers wise, but just had a really good conversion. Both variants both Kuldotha lists are different. There's still not really a set list. But they are, the one thing they do have in common is they're both on the same 16 creature package, with the Blast Runner, the Tomb Raider, the Bushwhacker, and the Voltaire and Epicure. And then like the flex slots are basically what burn spells you play, and Lotus Petals and or mutagenic growths. But yeah, it's still good to see Kuldotha doing well. And nice to see it not just completely dominating, but I imagine a few people will take those results as more needs to be banned.
Yeah, I ultimately think what probably happened, one thing that might be the reason to it anyways, but I'm unsure because I haven't checked every single sideboard and all that sort of stuff, but we do obviously having such a downward trend last week. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually did try to like reduce hate or something like that naturally, and I haven't checked the list to see if they went down on blasts or what have you, but I just think, I don't know, it is still a strong deck, and people find lists and finding the way, like you're also not gonna be a war. Like as soon as someone played Mountain Swiftby, you knew exactly what to play around almost.
Yeah.
Where like say Mutagenic Growth or Lotus Petal will definitely get people. They won't be prepared for the speed or they won't be prepared for the surprise. Like they'll bolt something, it's like, Mutagenic, it's saved.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think ultimately, obviously, the Swift Spear ban has definitely had an impact. Like the deck
for
is a
sure.
lot more fragile now.
For sure.
Its creatures are a lot easier to kill, and it relies a lot harder on that Kuldotha into Bushwhacker like mini 2-card combo. But it's the power is still there.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess another interesting point from this challenge is the double blue-white glitters in the top 4.
Yeah.
And I guess then the Jeskai glitters in 9th. It's
Mm.
quite a lot of
Glitters.
Enforcer glitters decks
Yeah.
in the top 10.
Yeah, it definitely is. There's a lot of glitters seems to take an upward trend at the minute because I think it's super. It's got really good quick draws that it can potentially just obviously steal games by just splurging stuff on the board that you just can't deal with, even if you have some sort of hate piece for the thing that the other glitters is going on. The Mer Enforcers, the Frogmites, or whatever will still kill you a lot quicker than you're probably prepared for.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that people keep bringing it because it gets a lot. I think it gets a lot of free wins as well. With here's a bunch of stuff. Let's draw a bunch of cards. Here's my rebuke to counter that one piece of interaction very early on. And I'm not surprised it does well. And people just, I think it's like the Ponza effect almost. It just kind of sometimes just high rolls, and I think that's kind of what it's done here. Along with obviously pilot skill definitely helps, but ultimately I think it is definitely just a high rolly deck, and sometimes it'll high roll, sometimes it'll do okay, and sometimes it can outgrind you as well. So
yeah, for sure. But yeah, I think ultimately like a pretty varied top 10. Obviously 2 Kuldotha and 2 glitters, but then just a pile of different decks.
Yeah.
With obviously Mono Blue Terror's obviously a strong one, but Jeskai Wildfire / Jeskai Ephemerate making a comeback. The Black White Blade brew that we've been seeing pop up definitely seems to be gaining some ground. Yeah, Tide and Blade is a really, really strong card.
I really like this deck.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
very up your street.
I also just think it's got to the point where it's almost part of the metagame, and I'm almost certain it's getting close to probably being the mid range deck that replaces Gardens. To be honest,
Interesting.
because I just think it's surprisingly strong. Like Omen Core Skyfish is nothing to like turn your nose up at. Goliath Paladins or Initiative, as Gardens has shown, is not something to turn away from. And the fact that red was probably the only thing really keeping it fully in check. The fact it's got that breathing space now with red, I think, just makes it so much better. I do think it's a strong contender.
I think these lists as well, in particular, are sort of obviously we had the black white deck previously in the meta that sort of died off.
Yeah, like the Ephemerate list.
And the Tide and Blades rejuvenated black white as an archetype, but these lists are a lot more in line with Gardens. It's essentially just a Deadly Dispute draw engine, a pile of removal, and some big initiative and Monarch guys. Obviously, the benefit you get is if you play white, you get Glinthawks and Core Skyfishes to recycle all your Tide and Blades, Lembuses, and like random ETBs off, I guess, Goliath Paladins and Frabens and stuff like that.
I think that's exactly it. It's basically, it is effectively a Gardens deck, but the advantage of having Omen the Dead, Core Skyfish is great, and also just generally your value engine, i.e. Core Skyfish and Glinthawk, actually just not only rebuys your removal, it just gives you so much random card advantage, and they're not nothing either. Like a 2/2 flyer and a 2/3 flyer is still a threat.
Yeah.
That some decks struggle with.
I think being able to slot Prismatic Strands in there as well is pretty big. Like that card's been one of the main cards that's kept white as a big player in this meta for a long time. Like it's one of the reasons why White Wing is so good.
For sure.
And having access to that is huge.
Definitely.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'd sort of want to touch on for this challenge in particular was just outside the top 10, how spicy it was, like down the way. I think 11th place was Monogreen Stompy, which is the highest I think I've ever seen Stumpy place, especially like recently. And it's quite a spicy like Stompy brew. It's got wild mongrel and Baskin root walla
Mm.
alongside like burning tree and emissary, basically a bunch of 2 drops.
Mhm.
Then after Stompy, there was a turbo fog list, and then after the turbo fog list, there was a cycle storm.
Hmm.
So yeah, the top 16 is extremely spicy, and there's a lot of variety in there.
Yeah. It does look like an interesting list, to be fair. I'm surprised Wild Mongrel's there with, like, it's only, as I say, it's only interactions like Root Waller as well.
Mm. It also just randomly doesn't die at cards like Snuff Out though as well.
Yeah.
Because you can obviously it changes its color.
And you can get it out of bolt range, to be fair, as well, if needed.
Yeah,
I
if you
guess.
need to, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Definitely there's definitely, as I say, like a lot of interesting decks, to be fair. And Kirby, obviously, with his 12th place Turbo Fog, as you've touched on. It's just interesting. There's a lot more room, to be fair, for random decks like Stompy and Turbo Fog to get through.
Yeah.
Which is pretty sweet.
Have you got anything else you want to touch on, or do you want to move on to
I'm
Sunday?
happy to move on to Sunday.
Sweet. So Sunday the 17th. First place once again was Kuldotha Red. Second place this time was Grixis Affinity. Third and fourth were like a classic Gardens list and another Grixis Affinity. And then fifth through eighth there was Turbo Fog and 3 Blue Black Terrors. The near misses, ninth was Blue Black Fair, and 10th was Blue White Glitters. So yeah, it's slightly less variety than the Saturday. With obviously the back-to-back wins for Kuldotha from both days. But yeah, Mer Enforcer deck's still doing very well. There's obviously a Blue White Glitters in 10th, and then a pair of Grixis Affinities in the top 4. And obviously Blue Black Terror doing exceedingly well.
Yeah, I was quite, well, not even surprised, but I really liked the amount of affinity. Sorry, that was in the top 4, as well as one of the Grixis Affinities was 420 Dragon as well, so he's making a return here with Grixis Affinity. Including a Seal of Removal in the sideboard, which was definitely a spicy one, for sure. Definitely just a interesting deck, because it's very much similar to what I would say a normal-ish Grixis Affinity, but it's also got like things like the drafting, the Black Ichor Wellspring and things like that. So it's definitely got its own sort of pizzazz, but it's more in line with the no Galv Blasts and run and cast downs and things like that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing I noticed about this, there's obviously quite a lot of Kenkus in the main, like with 3, and there's also no blades.
Yeah.
It's just four Blood Fountains, 4 Wellspring, and then 2 drafts as like the non-creature artifacts. And yeah, just stacked on 4 cast downs essentially.
Yeah, that's surprising. Something that I definitely missed was that obviously no Titan Blades is interesting.
Yeah, I don't even think there's any in his sideboard either. No, there isn't. So yeah, just completely disregard Titan Blade. But yeah, Luffy's list, although similar, it was obviously quite down on. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't even pick that up. There's no Crackland Shamans in 420's list.
Oh yeah. Well,
I've only just noticed that after looking at Luffy's list. So yeah, it's quite an off piece. Grixis Affinity. Interesting.
But yeah, still again, you've obviously got the 2 Grixis Affinity, and then you've got 3 Dimir Terror as well. Interestingly enough, they are slightly different lists. One of them's on Cryptic Serpent, Gurmag, and Terror. The other one's on just Gurmag and Terror with Phalanges in there. Same with the other one, the 8th place one.
Yeah.
So even the threat packages aren't the same. But
I think the one that is running the Cryptic Serpent is a lot more like mono blue Terror inclined.
Yeah.
With like 4 mental notes, 4 considers, and stuff like that. where the other blue black ones are like slightly more toned down.
Yeah, it is interesting. The one thing to note, I guess, is obviously to me, Blue Black Terrors obviously generally being a bad matchup for Cold Author. And interesting that 3, I don't know how much red was in the actual Sunday challenge, but is the fact that it's slowed down a little bit actually made Demir Terror a reasonable choice? Or do we think it's just good against the other Terror decks?
I think, to be fair, from what I seen of this challenge, I had a quick scan through before. There's barely any Cold Author lists at all. I think there was 3 that I picked up.
Yeah.
Obviously one ending up first place, but yeah, it was really underrepresented. But yeah, it just seems to have worked out really well for the blue black Terror players.
Yeah.
Of all versions.
Yeah.
Whether you want to play Cryptic Serpents or not.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a solid choice this weekend for sure, because it's with 3 in the top 8 is nothing to turn your nose about. There seems like a little bit of mono blue terror in there in the like challenge.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if the blue black one has the slight advantage, obviously having more threats and also snuff out being a good way to deal with their opposing terrors. Just seems like maybe it's time for blue black to become the terror deck of choice.
I think for me, the last thing that I sort of noticed that is true across both these is a big lack of Corgate. Like we were getting pretty used to seeing 1 or 2, sometimes even 3 Corgates in the top 8 every week. And there's none. I haven't even seen them sort of in the top 16s. So a really down week for Colgate.
Do we think it's just not with? Do you think maybe with the fact that Cold Author was the deck to beat, and now with the Swifty ban, I don't think it's quite the deck to beat. Do you think people are just hating more on Corgate, or do you think it's a lot worse position with obviously the likes of like say a Black White Blade, like it is interesting.
Yeah, I imagine it's gonna struggle to outgrind the Black White Blade lists with just the repeated like Skyfisher and Glinthawk value, especially when they just brick wall all the little 1/1s without the gates.
Yeah.
Or just attack through them. But yeah, I'm not sure. It's maybe just a down week. It might bounce back next week. But yeah, very odd not to see any Colgate represented in either top 16, I think.
Another thing again, it could be, as we've seen a lack of like red, the fact that Colgate has just got a good red matchup maybe just means that it's not got a deck to beat, therefore it struggles against an open field.
Yeah, because although both days were won by Cold Author, it was extremely underrepresented. As I say, with Sunday having only I think 3 copies in the entire challenge.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely an interesting one. Obviously, nice to see Grix Affinity make a comeback, especially 420 as well. 3 Demir Terrors is nice. Still got some variety in there. Obviously, you've got Gardens as well, and you've got Turbo Fog with 2 of the decks in 9th and 10th. Overall, a good week for challenges and a good showing of, to me, generally, like, the format seems to self-balanced itself again and kind of in place to where the PFP actually won it as well. Like, obviously, a little bit slower, but still, you're getting to the point where it's more grindy now, but still in a good place, I would say.
Yeah, I think we'll see now over the next few weeks. Obviously, if Cold Author just keeps winning, I imagine something's gonna have to be looked at again. But yeah, if, like next week, even if Cold Author's still top 8, but just doesn't do the like first or second place, I think we're probably in a pretty decent spot.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Anything else to cover, or would you like to move on to the surprise event that I did last minute?
Yeah, I'll let you go on to explain that.
Yeah, so this is an event that Walker sent me over. It is part of the whole Paupergeddon competing side of things. So this is called Pauperwars, and basically the LPI, the people who run Paupergeddon, have a tournament category which is the International Pauper Tour, where effectively, I think the middle one, the middle pop again, they do like Player of the Year, or which is the best performing player. And I think Heisen won it, or Mengu with top 80. It was the Lembas one, the one where Lembas broke out the format or whatever. But effectively, this is a new category that they've added, and it's called Pauperwars, and it effectively gives the person a buy for Paupergeddon, whichever Paupergeddon it is. I'm uncertain, but there was, I believe, 152 players for this event. Again, Italians definitely showing us how to play tournaments because they are absolutely nailing it. But effectively, this was at the weekend. I can't remember if it was the Saturday or the Sunday. But we have a metagame breakdown and we also have a top 8. So the top 8 was, in first place was Blue White Familiars. The second place was Jeskai Glitters. Third and fourth was Mono Red Goblins and Blue White Familiars. 5th through 8 was Walls Combo, Affinity, Mono Red Kuldotha, and Mono Blue Fair. So, interesting thing that stands out to me is A lot of good showing for Blue White Familiars, and B, it was actual Mono Red Goblins as well, with like, I forget the name, is it the Sly or whatever, the Saka Goblin tag creature gets +1/+1 or whatever it was.
It's yeah, it's got Goblin Sledder in. I don't know how far I would go on calling this Mono Red Goblins. I think that's probably a bit disingenuous. It's essentially another take on Kuldotha.
For sure.
It's if when you look at it, it's essentially Kuldotha with 2 Goblin Sledders and 3 Goblin Grenades.
Yes.
Like this, it still runs Voldaire and Epicure, and then there's no, other than the 2 Sledders, there's no more goblins than is normally in Kuldotha.
For sure.
It's definitely another interesting take on Kuldotha. I believe I saw Stompy post a list that was sort of in this vein that went even harder on the Sledder effects. Is there like a Mog Fanatic, or not Mog Fanatic, but Mog something that's essentially another Sledder. But yeah, it's cool again to see a different take. But yeah, I think calling it Mono Red Goblins is probably slightly incorrect.
It's got Sledders in. What can I say?
It's got 2 Sledders in.
I'm only going off the name on the results.
Yeah.
It does have Hearth Charm in there, which is a card I'd never heard of before. To be honest, I actually had to read it.
In the sideboard, which it's quite an interesting one. It's essentially just sort of a pseudo artifact removal that is also one of your guys is unblockable. Like, it seems fine.
Yeah.
I guess it's a bit of an anthem as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's got a destroy type artifact creature. All attacking creatures get +1, or target creature with power 2 or less is unblockable. So it reminds me, is it Ray's Effigy? Is that the card that the Kiln Fiend used to run? That's like destroy tag artifact or attacking creature gets +2/+2, where it's kind of essentially the same sort of thing, but it has like this mini anthem for your dudes. Or you can basically go, my blah 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 is unblockable, sack a bunch of stuff. My Blast Runner gets bigger than 2. It's got Menace. It's got bigger with Sledder, all that sort of stuff. So there's definitely it's definitely a sweet card to see in this sort of deck. But yeah. The other thing, again, is obviously 2 Blue-White Familiars for me. It definitely shows how strong Familiars is. Obviously, the PFP did mention that it was the highest win rate deck throughout the PFP announcement where the banned Swiss Spear. They basically had like a 56% win rate. And this shows, to be honest, that obviously either A, strong pilots are the ones that only play it, or B, basically it's only good in paper because of all the clicking and things like that. So it's definitely an interesting one, to be fair, that it's obviously showcased twice in this, with only from looking at the results as well, it's only 4.3% of the meta, which was 6 pilots playing it, and 2 of them got to the top 8. Definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, I think FAMS is one of those decks where it just is consistently good, but just doesn't see probably the amount of play that it deserves for how powerful the deck is. Obviously, it's like a lot of that has to do with Magic Online. But yeah, every time there's a paper event, we always see FAMS doing really well.
Yeah. again, the only other thing I've got to touch on is looking at the meta share. They had 17 decks, 17 glitter decks, and 12 Kuldotha decks, and basically you had one of each in the top 8. So like the conversion rate's not great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. The meta in general looks really nicely spread out.
Yeah, it does.
Which it's always good to see that.
I think
Interestingly, that the Blue Black Fair was tied for like the second most played deck.
I think it was very similar sort of spread in Paupergeddon, roughly. You had like it was Kuldotha at the time was the most played deck compared to Glitters, but like Blue Black Fair was doing really well. Then Boros and Gardens were up there. Affinity was up there. So I'm not so like it just seems very similar. Probably the only outlier is with Kuldotha the Bannon. I'm assuming got less of play and more people on Glitters. But other than that, it definitely does look pretty well spread. But no, overall, pretty cool event. The only other thing to note on is they did also do a teams trios event, which they like to do in Italy. They do a lot of them. The winners of those was Black Green Gardens, Jeskai FM, and Walls, and it was all three names sound familiar. It was like I think Loss, Manila, and Manco I have here. Manila is apparently on fire. Congrats for being on fire. Again, I get lost with the Italian metagame and player base. I recognise Adaptor and Walker, and that's kind of where I get lost after that.
Yeah.
But congrats. These events are absolutely mental and definitely where a lot of other countries should be at in Pauper, and kudos to yous. Yous are absolutely tearing it up, to be fair. Anything else to add?
No, that's it from me.
So yeah, just a couple of shout outs. Obviously, we've already shouted them out, to be fair. Thanks for Walker for sending over the Pauperwars lists and link. We'll obviously put the links in the description below so you can obviously read them. And again, congrats to 420 for returning to challenges. It's nice to see you nailing it, and also with a top 4 as well. And then after that, want to cover the hot takes?
Yeah. So our hot takes from last week. My first one was that Bogles or Heroic would be poised to make a return to the top 8. None this week. Again, I don't even think I've seen any scrolling through the challenges this week. So, sad times.
Yeah, mine was basically mid-range will be king next week with the return of Black White, Ephemerate Orblade, along with Corgate and Gardens, and basically Ponza will make a return after that, but that's obviously not the case. Gardens was very little. Black White was kind of the most played deck there. Corgate wasn't there at all, really, and there's no Black White Ephemerate. It's just like, I think it's almost went like, instead of all these mid-range decks, it's went, oh, Black White's the best mid-range deck, let's play that one. It almost seems like.
Yeah,
roughly.
I think like the Terror decks as well, obviously, especially the blue-black Terror take a lot of that mid-range sort of meta share. But yeah, interesting again. It's weird to see no Corgate.
Definitely.
My second one from last week was that Terror will show up in greater numbers and have to be further considered for a ban. Definitely, especially on the Sunday, showed up. It's probably not ban worthy yet, but if it keeps like putting 3 or 4 copies in the top 8, it'll be something that'll be touched back on, I would imagine.
Yeah, we had what, 4 in total of the 16
in
places.
the 2 top 8s.
And there was also a lot on the Sunday as well, like after you scroll past the top 10.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised there. My last one was that Poison Storm or Mogwarts would make a top 10. Let's be honest, that wasn't going to happen. But, you know, sometimes you win some, you lose some. Hot takes for next week?
My first one was that Kuldotha will top 8 again next week, but continue to be pretty low representation-wise.
Seems fair. Mine is Demir Terror, one of the most represented decks next challenge. But ultimately, my main point I want to make is I think this will be the most represented Terror deck for sure. I think it'll probably take over Mono Blue.
Yeah. Especially after seeing those results on Sunday, it sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
My last one is that we'll see more Titan blades. Not necessarily just in that blue, white, black list, but like Grixis Affinity and other black decks essentially. I think the card's really good. Obviously, if Terra keeps ramping up in numbers, it's going to be really well positioned as well.
Oh, for sure.
So it makes sense.
My last one is basically Glitters will probably be up there with one of the most played decks, especially after the Pauperwars, and also having some success on the Saturday as well. We'll see more of these. Glitters players trying to basically Bogles people and just high roll them to death.
Yeah.
So that is it. Is that it? Anything else to add?
No, that's it from me.
So, guys, thank you all for listening. Not only just this episode, but thank you for listening throughout the year. We are on like episode 34, I think this is 35. Like, we are absolutely flying here, and you guys have been here through the entirety of this time, and I really do appreciate the support, and as does Reese. So, thank you all for listening, and yeah, have a great Christmas, have a great New Year, and we'll see you in the New Year with a bang. For sure, we're definitely hitting the ground running.
Hopefully.
So, guys, that is all from us at Casting Commons. Until next time, and do not forget to stay hydrated. Peace.
See you next year.